Huey P. Newton's story begins in 1942, in the heart of Louisiana, where he was born into a world marked by hardship and systemic inequality. From the very beginning, life presented him with obstacles that would have discouraged many. But for Newton, these challenges became the foundation of an extraordinary resilience. His early years were defined by the stark realities of poverty, a struggling family, and the pervasive weight of racism that touched every aspect of daily life. Yet, even as a young boy, Huey displayed a remarkable determination to rise above his circumstances, showing glimpses of the courage and intellect that would later define his life. When Newton's family moved to Oakland, California, he entered a new environment that was equally challenging. The urban streets of Oakland were unforgiving, marked by economic hardship, overcrowded housing, and communities struggling with limited resources. It was in these streets that Newton learned some of his earliest and most important lessons about survival, justice, and community. He witnessed firsthand the struggles of African American families striving to make ends meet, battling systemic discrimination while nurturing hopes for a better future. These experiences instilled in him a deep understanding of the social inequalities that plagued his community and ignited a lifelong commitment to seek change. As a young man, Newton was not only navigating the complexities of growing up in a racially segregated society, but he was also discovering the power of education, critical thinking, and self-expression. He cultivated an awareness of the broader political and social issues affecting African Americans, absorbing the lessons of history and the insights of thinkers and activists who challenged injustice. From his childhood encounters with adversity to the moments of personal reflection and intellectual exploration, every experience contributed to shaping the leader he would become, a man unafraid to confront inequality head-on, who believed in standing up for his community with courage and conviction. Newton's journey was not simply about resistance. It was about envisioning a future where his community could thrive. It was this vision that would later inspire him to co-found the Black Panther Party, an organization committed to empowering African Americans, providing essential social programs, and challenging the systemic forces that perpetuated injustice. But before those historic achievements, there was the story of a boy growing up in Oakland, learning to navigate a world that often seemed stacked against him, yet refusing to be defeated by it. Today, as we explore the life and legacy of Huey P. Newton, we are invited to witness the story of resilience, courage, and unwavering dedication to justice. His life reminds us that even in the face of profound challenges, one person's vision and determination can spark transformative change. If you are inspired by stories of leadership, social justice, and the relentless pursuit of equality, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this journey with others. Join us as we uncover the remarkable life of Huey P. Newton, a man whose courage and commitment continue to resonate across generations. By the mid-1960s, Huey P. Newton had already endured more than most could imagine. Yet the streets of Oakland still held lessons in courage and necessity that could not be learned in classrooms or homes. Life had exposed him early to the harsh realities of systemic racism, poverty, and the grinding tension of urban life, shaping a young man who understood both the limitations imposed upon him by society and the power of resolve within his own spirit. The turbulence of the era only intensified his awareness. Every act of injustice he witnessed reinforced the truth that passivity in the face of oppression was a luxury his community could not afford. He saw the ways in which African American neighborhoods were consistently neglected by those in power. Schools lacked resources, jobs were scarce, health services were inadequate, and the ever-present threat of police violence loomed as both a symptom and enforcer of inequality. Newton's formative experiences, combined with the stories and wisdom imparted by his family and mentors, had already instilled in him a keen sense of justice and a determination to act when others might have remained silent. Yet nothing prepared him for the profound shockwaves sent through the African American community by the assassination of Malcolm X in 1965. An event that struck at the heart of the struggle for dignity, respect, and self-determination. The loss of such a prominent and fearless leader illuminated the dangerous reality faced by those who dared to challenge systemic oppression, making it painfully clear that advocacy without vigilance could have deadly consequences, and inspiring Newton to envision a new form of organized resistance, one that would protect, uplift, and empower his people in ways that were practical, immediate, and rooted in community. It was within this crucible of social unrest, mourning, and the urgency of survival that Newton, along with his close friend Bobby Seale, began to articulate what would become the foundation of the Black Panther Party. Unlike other contemporary movements that emphasized nonviolence and abstract policy reform, Newton and Seale understood that the conditions of African American communities required a bold and assertive approach. They had grown up navigating neighborhoods where the police were not allies but enforcers of a system that perpetuated fear, where being young and black often meant walking a fine line between survival and danger, and where the community's struggles were too urgent to be delayed by rhetoric alone. Newton's experiences in Oakland, witnessing the disregard for human dignity, the unchecked aggression of law enforcement, and the daily battles of his neighbors to survive under oppressive conditions, cemented in him a belief that change required both direct action and a framework for long-term empowerment. He did not seek conflict for its own sake. Rather, he recognized that the persistent injustices faced by African Americans could no longer be ignored, and that defending one's community, establishing local programs, and asserting the right to self-determination were essential to creating real change. Newton's vision was shaped not only by the immediate circumstances of his environment, but also by the intellectual and philosophical currents that influenced him and Seale. They studied the writings of revolutionary thinkers, absorbing ideas about self-defense, community organization, and the global struggle against oppression, while simultaneously remaining grounded in the realities of their own neighborhoods. Every encounter with injustice, whether it was a young man harassed by police, a family struggling to put food on the table, or the systemic barriers to education and employment, reinforced the necessity of translating abstract ideals into practical measures that could make an immediate difference in people's lives. The assassination of Malcolm X was a stark reminder of the costs of activism, yet it also underscored the power of vision and the impact that a determined individual or a collective movement could have in inspiring hope and demanding accountability. Newton internalized this lesson deeply, understanding that leadership in the fight for justice required both courage and strategy, combining public advocacy with tangible initiatives that directly improved the lives of African Americans while simultaneously challenging the structures that allowed inequality to flourish. The formation of the Black Panther Party was, in many, a natural extension of Newton's journey from a young boy navigating Oakland's tough streets to a man capable of articulating a bold vision for community empowerment. The 10-point program, conceived by Newton and Seale, outlined a clear agenda for social, economic, and political reform, emphasizing the importance of education, fair housing, access to healthcare, and protection from police brutality. But beyond policy, the party became a living embodiment of Newton's philosophy, that African Americans could assert their dignity, safeguard their communities, and demand respect without waiting for permission from a system that had historically failed them. The party's visibility, particularly in its early years, drew national attention, but its true power lay in its practical programs: free breakfast initiatives for children, community health clinics, and patrols that monitored police activity to prevent abuse, demonstrating that resistance could be both principled and compassionate. Newton's leadership exemplified the integration of moral conviction, tactical insight, and personal courage, showing that one could challenge oppression while fostering tangible improvements in the community. bridging the gap between activism and everyday life. Newton's story during this period is not simply one of confrontation with injustice. It is a narrative of transformation, of translating personal experience into collective action. Every incident of police harassment, every example of social neglect, and every moment of witnessing violence or discrimination deepened his resolve to act decisively, shaping a leader who was as committed to education and community service as he was to the defense of his people. The tragedy of Malcolm X's assassination underscored the stakes of their mission, illustrating both the vulnerability and the potential power inherent in organized resistance. Newton's response was not to retreat or despair, but to channel grief and outrage into action, creating structures within the Black Panther Party that would empower African Americans to claim their rights, assert their presence, and demand justice. His life in these years reflects the intensity of a period when moral clarity, strategic thinking, and unyielding courage converged to produce one of the most influential figures in the struggle for African American liberation. Through these experiences, Huey P. Newton became more than a symbol. He became a catalyst for change, demonstrating how witnessing injustice could ignite a lifelong commitment to empowerment and resistance. His journey reveals the interplay between personal experience and collective action, illustrating how one individual's response to systemic oppression can inspire broader movements, create lasting institutions, and instill hope in communities long denied it. As we explore Newton's life, we see the unfolding of a leader shaped by adversity, galvanized by injustice, and propelled by a vision of a world where equality, dignity, and self-determination are not merely aspirations but achievable realities. By engaging with his story, viewers are invited to reflect on the ongoing importance of courage, community, and principled action, and to appreciate how history is often shaped by those who refuse to remain passive in the face of injustice. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others to spread the story of Huey P. Newton and the lessons his life continues to offer. By the time Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale decided to take decisive action in 1966, the urgency of the moment was undeniable. They had grown up witnessing a society that too often turned a blind eye to the suffering of African American communities, where systemic inequality, poverty, and the constant threat of police violence were daily realities that shaped every aspect of life. Newton's experiences on the streets of Oakland, combined with the lessons of resilience, strategy, and courage he had absorbed from family, mentors, and the wider intellectual and revolutionary currents of the time, had prepared him to take a bold step that would alter the course of history for Black communities across the United States. It was not enough to merely protest or lament the injustices. Newton and Seale recognized that an organized, visible, and disciplined movement was necessary to both protect their neighborhoods and inspire the broader community to demand systemic change. Out of this realization, in the fall of 1966, the Black Panther Party was born, conceived not simply as a political organization, but as a force committed to the self-determination, empowerment, and protection of African Americans. Its creation was a direct response to the failures of existing institutions, the neglect of authorities, and the urgent need for African Americans to assert their rights in a society that too often denied them. From the very beginning, the Black Panther Party distinguished itself by articulating a clear and actionable vision for social justice through its groundbreaking 10-point program, a document that reflected Newton's insight into the structural inequalities faced by Black Americans and his unwavering commitment to community uplift. The program was both radical and practical, calling for quality education that taught the truth of African American history, opportunities for gainful employment that would ensure economic stability, decent housing that provided dignity and safety, and medical care that could alleviate the chronic health disparities plaguing underserved neighborhoods. At its The program demanded an end to police brutality and the legal mechanisms that allowed unchecked authority to target and oppress Black citizens. recognizing that true freedom and equality could not be achieved without addressing the systemic abuses that had long gone unchallenged. Unlike abstract political manifestos, Newton and Seale's 10-point program was deeply grounded in the lived experiences of their communities, informed by direct observation, personal hardship, and the moral imperative to act on behalf of those whose voices had been ignored for generations. The Black Panther Party's approach was deliberately visible, assertive, and disciplined, reflecting Newton's belief that empowerment required both self-defense and community organization. He and Seale encouraged members to patrol their neighborhoods, not as an act of aggression, but as a measure to ensure safety, monitor police activity, and demonstrate that African Americans would no longer be passive in the face of systemic injustice. This public presence challenged the perception of power in American cities, signaling to both authorities and community members that change was not only necessary but imminent. Newton's leadership was instrumental in shaping this strategy. He combined a charismatic and authoritative presence with careful planning, teaching members that their role was not merely to react to oppression but to proactively protect, educate, and serve the people. The party's activities quickly expanded from Oakland to other urban centers, each chapter tailored to address the specific needs and circumstances of the local African American communities it served, yet all united by the principles of the 10-point program. This balance of local responsiveness and overarching vision was a hallmark of Newton's strategy, highlighting his ability to translate philosophical and political ideals into concrete, actionable initiatives that could make a tangible difference in people's lives. What made the Black Panther Party particularly compelling was its dual focus on protection and service. Newton understood that advocacy alone, without addressing immediate needs, would not be sufficient to mobilize communities or gain their trust. Under his leadership, the party launched programs that ranged from free breakfast initiatives for children to community health clinics, educational workshops, and support services for families affected by incarceration or poverty. These programs were not merely charitable acts. They were intentional demonstrations of self-reliance, collective responsibility, and practical empowerment, showing that the party could simultaneously challenge systemic injustice and improve daily life for the people it served. Newton's vision was revolutionary in its insistence that social change required both confrontation and construction, the readiness to defend against oppression coupled with the proactive building of institutions that could sustain and uplift communities. This approach resonated with young African Americans across the nation, many of whom had grown up witnessing the failures of the system and were inspired by the possibility of meaningful action and leadership within their own neighborhoods. The 10-point program also served as a moral and strategic compass for the party, guiding its members in both public advocacy and internal organization. Newton emphasized that the program was not merely a set of demands, but a blueprint for transforming communities through accountability, education, and empowerment, underscoring that self-determination and dignity were inseparable from social justice. The clarity and ambition of these goals attracted attention, provoked debate, and established the Black Panther Party as a symbol of Black pride, courage, and resilience, while simultaneously challenging prevailing narratives that depicted African Americans as passive or powerless. Newton's ability to articulate a vision that combined immediate, tangible benefits with long-term structural change was central to the party's influence, demonstrating that a movement could be both principled and pragmatic, visionary and rooted in the realities of everyday life. This fusion of philosophy, strategy, and action made the Black Panther Party a transformative force, elevating it from a local initiative in Oakland to a nationally recognized movement with enduring historical significance. Newton and Seale's work in founding the Black Panther Party was a direct response to the injustices they had both witnessed and experienced. but it was also a testament to the power of leadership grounded in empathy, intelligence, and courage. Their creation of the 10-point program reflected a deep understanding of the interconnectedness of economic, social, and political inequality, and their commitment to protecting and uplifting African American communities demonstrated that organized, disciplined, and principled action could effect meaningful change. By framing the party as both a defender and a servant of the people, Newton transformed the experience of resistance into a proactive and constructive force, inspiring generations to recognize the value of standing up for justice while simultaneously building institutions that could sustain and empower communities over time. The story of the Black Panther Party's founding is therefore not merely an account of activism, but a powerful illustration of how vision, courage, and strategy can intersect to create enduring change, demonstrating that the pursuit of equality requires both moral conviction and concrete action. By sharing this history, viewers are encouraged to reflect on the legacy of Newton and Seal, understanding how their determination and insight created a movement that continues to inspire activism and community engagement today. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it to keep the story of the Black Panther Party and its transformative impact alive for future generations. Huey P. Newton's vision for social change was unlike that of any other civil rights leader of his time, not because he rejected the principles of equality or justice, but because he recognized that the struggles faced by African Americans required a multidimensional approach that combined both protection and proactive empowerment. While many leaders sought to achieve change through legal avenues, negotiation, and moral persuasion, Newton understood that systemic oppression was enforced by structures and individuals prepared to maintain their power through violence and intimidation, and that communities under threat needed the capacity to defend themselves. From the crowded, often dangerous streets of Oakland where he grew up, Newton had observed how ordinary people could be subjected to harassment, brutality, and arbitrary punishment simply for existing within a society that viewed them as expendable. These experiences informed his belief that self-defense was not merely a right but a practical necessity, and that preparation, vigilance, and the readiness to confront injustice head-on were essential components of any serious movement seeking to uplift marginalized communities. At the same time, Newton's strategy was never purely reactive. He combined this confrontational stance with a vision of service, understanding that building trust and support within the community was just as vital as challenging authority. He recognized that the power of the Black Panther Party would come not only from its ability to resist, but also from its ability to meet the needs of the people it represented, creating programs that improved daily life while simultaneously asserting dignity and autonomy in a society that too often denied both. The philosophy that guided Newton and the party was rooted in a profound understanding of interconnected struggles, where the fight against police brutality could not be separated from the fight for housing, education, healthcare, and economic opportunity. Newton believed that demonstrating competence, discipline, and accountability within the community would strengthen the party's moral authority and legitimacy, making it clear that their mission was not rooted in chaos or disruption, but in a deep commitment to justice and empowerment. In practical terms, this meant that the Panthers patrolled neighborhoods, accompanied citizens to ensure fair treatment, and monitored police activity not out of aggression but out of necessity, creating an environment where residents could feel protected in the absence of reliable institutional safeguards. At the same time, the party's community programs, free breakfasts for children, health clinics, educational workshops, and support for families affected by incarceration illustrated Newton's understanding that social transformation required both defense and development, that resistance alone without constructive action could not yield lasting change. Through these programs, The Panthers demonstrated that they were capable of providing what the state often neglected, offering tangible proof that African American communities could organize, govern, and care for themselves when given the space and support to do so. Newton's commitment to armed self-defense was not a reckless or impulsive strategy but a deliberate, strategic choice shaped by his life experiences and the realities of systemic oppression. He understood that without the capacity to protect their communities, efforts to uplift them could be undermined, and that visibility, discipline, and readiness could act as both deterrent and assertion of dignity. Unlike symbolic gestures of resistance, the Panthers' armed presence was a physical manifestation of their philosophy, one that forced society to acknowledge the humanity and agency of Black Americans in a context that often sought to deny both. Yet, even as they carried out these patrols and exercises of self-defense, Newton maintained an unwavering focus on the broader vision of empowerment, ensuring that members understood the principles of accountability, education, and service that underpinned the party's legitimacy. The arms were never an end in themselves but a tool to safeguard the space in which community uplift, dialogue, and political education could occur, reflecting Newton's ability to integrate strategy, principle, and practical necessity into a coherent framework of action. The duality of resistance and service also served to differentiate the Black Panther Party from other movements, as Newton was acutely aware that credibility required action on multiple fronts. By addressing immediate needs through programs that delivered food, healthcare, and education while simultaneously preparing for potential confrontations with unjust authorities, the party embodied a comprehensive approach to liberation that combined philosophy with practice. Newton often emphasized that a community's survival depended on both the ability to defend itself and the capacity to build institutions that could sustain its members' well-being, a vision that required strategic thinking, disciplined organization, and a deep understanding of human behavior under stress. The Panthers' insistence on self-defense challenged prevailing narratives that depicted African Americans as passive or dependent, offering a model of dignity, assertiveness, and proactive engagement that inspired countless young people to see themselves as agents of change rather than objects of oppression. Newton's leadership style, intelligent, charismatic, and principled, ensured that these ideals were not abstract but integrated into the party's daily operations, creating a culture where accountability, courage, and service were inseparable. Newton's approach also had a philosophical underpinning drawn from global revolutionary thought, including the writings of Frantz Fanon and other anti-colonial thinkers, who argued that self-determination often required both resistance and constructive action. He interpreted these ideas in the context of urban America, recognizing that the struggles faced by African Americans were both local and systemic, shaped by centuries of exploitation and ongoing discrimination. This intellectual framework gave Newton the confidence to act boldly, to insist on armed self-defense as a legitimate component of community survival, while simultaneously building structures of support that could outlast confrontations with law enforcement. It was a delicate balance that required constant attention, training, and the cultivation of trust among members and neighbors alike. Yet Newton maintained that the combination of preparedness and service was the most effective way to advance both the moral and material well-being of Black communities. By embracing both protection and empowerment, Newton and the Panthers created a model of activism that was dynamic, multidimensional, and deeply rooted in the realities of the people they served, demonstrating that true leadership required both courage in the face of danger and a sustained commitment to tangible, positive change. The legacy of Newton's dual approach continues to resonate because it challenges simplistic notions of civil rights leadership, emphasizing that meaningful change often demands courage, strategy, and the willingness to confront injustice directly while simultaneously investing in the community's long-term well-being. by embracing armed self-defense alongside an extensive network of community programs. Newton ensured that the Black Panther Party was not only a symbol of resistance, but also a functional instrument of empowerment, capable of inspiring hope, demanding accountability, and providing practical support to those who had been systematically marginalized. The story of Newton's leadership reminds us that the struggle for justice is rarely linear or confined to a single method. Rather, it requires vision, adaptability, and the moral clarity to act decisively in defense of both principles and people. This philosophy of combined confrontation and service invites viewers to reflect on the ways in which courage, preparation, and empathy can intersect to create enduring change. And it underscores the continuing relevance of Newton's strategies for anyone seeking to challenge oppression while nurturing their community. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it widely to honor the legacy of Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party, keeping alive the story of their courage, ingenuity, and enduring impact on the fight for justice. Under Huey Newton's visionary leadership, the Black Panther Party evolved into more than a movement for self-defense. It became a beacon of hope and practical support for the black communities that had been systematically neglected and marginalized for generations. Newton understood that empowerment required tangible action, and he translated this understanding into programs designed to meet the immediate needs of families, while simultaneously fostering long-term resilience and self-sufficiency. These initiatives, later known as survival programs, emerged as a bold declaration that black communities could provide for themselves when left unsupported by the state, and they became a cornerstone of the party's philosophy, intertwining activism with service in a way that was unprecedented at the time. The programs were diverse, addressing food insecurity, healthcare, education, and legal support, and each was conceived not only as a practical solution but also as a moral statement, demonstrating the party's commitment to dignity, equity, and empowerment in the face of systemic neglect. Free food banks were among the first of these initiatives, providing hundreds of children with nutritious meals at a time when hunger was a daily reality in many neighborhoods. Newton insisted that no child should have to face the day empty-handed, and volunteers would rise early to prepare breakfast and distribute it to those in need, often accompanied by lessons, storytelling, and community engagement that instilled pride and a sense of belonging. These efforts were not merely acts of charity but a reclamation of agency, proving that organized, determined communities could solve problems that government institutions had long ignored. The image of young panthers serving meals, assisting parents, and engaging with children became emblematic of a movement that combined compassion with conviction, illustrating that strength could coexist with care, and that resistance was inseparable from the practical act of building life-affirming structures within marginalized communities. Alongside these food initiatives, the party established medical clinics that offered services previously inaccessible to many residents, including screenings, vaccinations, and general care, often staffed by trained volunteers who brought their expertise into neighborhoods that had been medically underserved for decades. Newton's approach to healthcare reflected a keen understanding that social justice required attention to both economic and physical well-being, and that addressing immediate health disparities was as vital as challenging systemic inequality in education, employment, or policing. The clinics were not simply functional spaces. They were also sites of education, where residents learned about nutrition, preventative care, and how to navigate a medical system that had historically neglected them. By placing health resources directly within the community, Newton demonstrated the power of localized, community-driven solutions, And he ensured that the Black Panther Party was not merely a political entity, but a lifeline for those whom society had often abandoned. These clinics inspired similar initiatives across the country, establishing a model for integrating political activism with practical social support that resonated far beyond Oakland, extending to cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Boston, where local chapters adapted the programs to their community's unique needs. Education formed another critical pillar of the party's survival programs, reflecting Newton's belief that empowerment required knowledge as well as sustenance and protection. The BP opened community schools and tutoring centers that provided alternative education, emphasizing critical thinking, cultural awareness, and political literacy in a context where public schools often failed to offer students a meaningful understanding of their history and potential. By fostering a sense of pride and self-confidence alongside intellectual development, these educational programs challenged the narrative that Black children were inherently disadvantaged or incapable, proving that access, encouragement, and culturally relevant curricula could dramatically alter life trajectories. Newton believed that education was both a shield and a weapon. It equipped young people to navigate and contest an unequal society while preparing them to lead and innovate within. Programs included classes on African American history, literature, and civic engagement, ensuring that knowledge was not abstract but deeply tied to the lived experiences and struggles of the community. These initiatives transformed the party from a reactive force into a proactive one, asserting that liberation was not only about defending rights but about cultivating the capacity to claim and exercise them effectively. Newton also recognized the importance of addressing broader social challenges, creating programs that assisted families navigating the criminal justice system, offered legal aid, and provided support for the children of incarcerated parents. By alleviating these pressures, the party helped maintain family stability, reinforcing community cohesion in environments frequently destabilized by systemic inequality and discriminatory law enforcement practices. Additionally, the Panthers organized cultural and recreational activities that nurtured creativity, self-expression, and collective identity, fostering environments in which young people could explore their potential while building bonds with mentors and peers committed to positive development. These programs reflected Newton's holistic vision. True empowerment could not be achieved through confrontation alone, but required simultaneous investment in health, knowledge, and communal strength, creating a network of support that was both practical and symbolic. Every initiative was a tangible manifestation of the party's ethos, demonstrating that systemic injustice could be challenged not only by raising voices and confronting power, but by constructing enduring structures that uplifted the marginalized and asserted collective agency in ways that were visible, measurable, and transformative. Through these survival programs, Newton ensured that the Black Panther Party became a living example of how strategic leadership could integrate activism with practical service, offering lessons that extended beyond any single political moment. The programs illustrated that meaningful change arises when communities are equipped with the resources, knowledge, and organizational support necessary to thrive despite systemic challenges, and that leadership is most powerful when it inspires, protects, and empowers simultaneously. By combining education, healthcare, nutrition, and legal support into a cohesive framework of community uplift, Newton crafted a model that remains relevant today, demonstrating that resistance and service are not separate pursuits but intertwined pathways toward justice, resilience, and self-determination. The story of these initiatives reveals a movement that was as compassionate as it was courageous, as innovative as it was principled, and as deeply rooted in the daily realities of Black life as it was in the vision of a more just and equitable society. By witnessing and participating in these programs, the world saw a movement that defended educated, nourished, and inspired, proving that the Black Panther Party under Newton's guidance was a force for empowerment in its most comprehensive and enduring form. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it widely to honor the legacy of Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party, keeping alive the story of their resilience, innovation, and lasting impact on communities across America. From the earliest days of their activism, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale were not only shaped by the urgent realities of poverty, systemic racism, and police oppression in Oakland, but were also profoundly influenced by the intellectual currents of their time, which provided them with a lens to understand the world and a blueprint for revolutionary action. Newton, a deeply reflective thinker despite the harshness of his upbringing, found resonance in the writings of French existentialists such as Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre, whose works explored the human condition, the responsibilities of individuals in shaping their destinies, and the moral imperative of confronting injustice. Camus's insistence on the necessity of rebellion in the face of absurdity and Sartre's emphasis on freedom and personal accountability illuminated for Newton and Seale that oppression was not an abstract concept, but a lived reality that demanded conscious, deliberate, and, at times, radical responses. These philosophical frameworks offered them a vocabulary to articulate the frustrations, hopes, and aspirations of the African American community, providing both a moral foundation and a practical roadmap for the kind of activism that could challenge entrenched systems of power while affirming the dignity and agency of those most affected by systemic inequities. At the same time, the revolutionary teachings of Mao Zedong presented a strategic dimension to their thinking, emphasizing the role of grassroots organization, community mobilization, and the principle that liberation required more than protest, it required disciplined, collective action capable of both defending communities and challenging entrenched power structures. Mao's writings on the relationship between intellectual leadership and the people, the importance of solidarity among oppressed populations, and the necessity of preparing for confrontation with established authorities resonated deeply with Newton and Seale, who were witnessing firsthand the brutal realities of law enforcement in black neighborhoods, where routine arrests, harassment, and violence were tools of systemic control. These lessons were not merely academic. They were applied directly in the formulation of the Black Panther Party's 10-point program, the establishment of survival initiatives, and the party's broader strategies for community defense, education, and empowerment. Newton, in particular, demonstrated an ability to synthesize these philosophical and revolutionary ideas with the urgent practicalities of his environment, creating a framework that could respond both to immediate crises and to long-term structural inequities. The intellectual influences of Camus, Sartre, and Mao also shaped the psychological dimension of the party's work, helping Newton and Seale understand that true liberation required more than external reforms. It required the transformation of consciousness within oppressed communities. Psychological liberation, as they conceived it, was about breaking the internalized chains of inferiority and fear imposed by centuries of systemic racism and social marginalization. Through education, communal programs, and assertive activism, they sought to instill confidence, self-respect, and an awareness of collective power, teaching community members that they had the right and capacity to protect themselves, demand justice, and participate fully in shaping their own futures. This understanding informed the party's approach to youth engagement, where mentorship, cultural education, and community leadership programs aimed to cultivate not only informed citizens, but also psychologically empowered individuals ready to assert their rights and contribute meaningfully to societal change. Newton's engagement with these thinkers was not simply about intellectual posturing. It was a deliberate, conscious strategy to equip himself, Seal, and their growing cadre of activists with both the moral clarity and tactical sophistication needed to navigate an environment of systemic hostility. The party's members were trained to understand the broader structures of power and oppression, to articulate their demands in a compelling and ethical manner, and to adopt strategic measures when defending their communities, ensuring that their actions were not reactive but informed by a broader vision of justice and liberation. This integration of theory and practice allowed the Black Panther Party to function simultaneously as a political organization, a community service provider, and a movement for psychological and social transformation, with Newton's leadership exemplifying the synthesis of intellectual rigor, strategic acumen, and deep empathy for the community. Moreover, Newton and Seal's intellectual influences extended beyond theoretical insights into practical applications that shaped the party's unique identity, combining elements of revolutionary strategy with culturally rooted approaches to community organizing. Mao's emphasis on understanding local conditions, mobilizing the masses, and building self-sufficient networks informed the party's establishment of community schools, health clinics, and food programs, ensuring that activism addressed immediate needs while cultivating long-term resilience. Likewise, the existentialist insistence on responsibility and authenticity inspired Newton to lead in a manner that balanced moral conviction with tactical pragmatism, emphasizing the necessity of acting decisively in defense of community interests while maintaining ethical coherence in the party's programs and public messaging. This intellectual grounding helped the Black Panther Party navigate the complexities of public perception, media scrutiny, and internal debates, creating a movement that was principled, coherent, and effective even amid intense opposition. Ultimately, the fusion of existentialist thought, Maoist strategy, and lived experience enabled Newton and Seal to develop a revolutionary framework that was both practical and visionary, grounded in the daily realities of African American communities yet informed by a global awareness of struggle, liberation, and human potential. By internalizing these ideas and translating them into concrete action, Newton and Seal built a movement that extended far beyond mere protest. Combining education, community service, self-defense, and psychological empowerment into a cohesive whole. Their work illustrated that intellectual engagement and strategic planning are not abstract pursuits but vital tools for social transformation, and that a well-led, principled movement could inspire profound and lasting change in the lives of those it served. The story of Newton and Seal's intellectual and philosophical influences reminds us that revolutionary leadership is as much about learning, thinking, and synthesizing ideas as it is about action, and that the power of an idea, when coupled with courage and moral clarity, can ignite movements that reshape societies. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others to celebrate the enduring legacy of Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, and the Black Panther Party, ensuring that the lessons of their vision, strategy, and courage continue to inspire future generations. From the moment Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale co-founded the Black Panther Party in the streets of Oakland, California, in 1966, the organization's trajectory was nothing short of extraordinary, reflecting both the urgency of the social crisis and the compelling vision of its founders. What began as a small, localized effort to protect and uplift African American communities in Oakland rapidly evolved into a movement that spanned the nation, capturing the attention of the media, politicians, and the public alike. The party's growth was fueled not merely by its ideology but by its visible and immediate impact on the daily lives of people who had long been marginalized, neglected, and subjected to systemic violence. The streets of Oakland became the incubator for a new model of activism, one that combined assertive self-defense, rigorous organizational structure, and an unwavering commitment to community service, offering both a practical response to oppression and an aspirational vision for justice and equality. As news of the Black Panther Party's activities spread, it quickly inspired the establishment of chapters in other cities facing similar challenges, from Richmond and Los Angeles to Seattle, Washington, and beyond. In each location, the party adapted its principles to the specific needs of the local community while maintaining the core values articulated in the 10-point program. Emphasizing education, employment, housing, an end to police brutality, and overall empowerment of African American citizens. The rapid expansion of the PEEP was a testament to the resonance of its mission and the meticulous organizational work undertaken by Newton, Seal, and early members who ensured that the party was more than just a collection of activists. It was a disciplined, principled movement capable of sustaining operations across multiple regions and effectively addressing the immediate social, economic, and psychological needs of those it served. The visibility of the Black Panther Party was amplified through a combination of deliberate media engagement, public demonstrations, and a willingness to confront authority when necessary, though always framed within the context of self-defense rather than unprovoked aggression. Images of panthers patrolling neighborhoods with arms visible, attending city council meetings, and speaking at rallies conveyed a sense of empowerment and defiance that resonated with African Americans nationwide, particularly in urban centers where systemic neglect and police harassment were daily realities. At the same time, the party's focus on community programs, including free breakfast initiatives for children, health clinics, educational workshops, and prison visitation and support efforts, showcased a holistic approach to activism, demonstrating that true resistance encompassed both protection from immediate threats and the cultivation of long-term social and economic resilience. The Black Panther Party's national growth was also facilitated by the powerful charisma and strategic insight of Newton, whose leadership combined philosophical rigor with pragmatic organization. He understood the importance of cultivating a public image that conveyed both seriousness of purpose and moral authority, ensuring that the party's actions were noticed but also contextualized as a response to systemic injustice rather than an embrace of violence for its own sake. This balance allowed the BP to attract a diverse membership that included teenagers, college students, professionals, and veterans, all drawn to the party's compelling combination of community service, assertive self-protection, and visionary advocacy for African American empowerment. The stories of young Panthers distributing food in Chicago, providing medical care in Boston, or organizing educational programs in Harlem became emblematic of a new era of Black activism, one in which dignity, self-determination, and solidarity were central to the struggle. Moreover, the party's expansion was intertwined with its careful use of media and public relations to amplify its message beyond the neighborhoods where members were physically present. Newspaper articles, radio interviews, and television coverage frequently highlighted both the Panthers' social programs and their bold stances on self-defense, allowing the organization to communicate its vision to a national audience and attract attention from sympathetic and curious observers alike. This media presence was not incidental. It was a strategic choice that underscored Newton's understanding of the broader political landscape, recognizing that transforming public perception and challenging dominant narratives were as essential to the movement as on-the-ground activism. By framing the party as both a protector and an advocate, Newton ensured that the BPP's rapid growth was supported by a coherent and compelling public identity that could inspire, inform, and mobilize communities across the country. The national attention garnered by the Black Panther Party also had the effect of putting systemic issues in African American communities on the broader political agenda, forcing local and federal authorities to confront the realities of poverty, police brutality, and lack of access to essential services. While the Panthers faced significant opposition from law enforcement and were often mischaracterized in the media, their expansion into more than 40 cities highlighted a growing recognition among African Americans that organized, principled resistance was both necessary and possible. Chapters replicated successful programs and shared strategies for community engagement and self-defense, creating a decentralized but unified network that amplified the party's impact and ensured that the principles Newton and Seal championed were not confined to a single locality but reverberated across the nation. As the BPP's influence spread, it became increasingly clear that the party represented more than a political organization. It embodied a movement capable of reshaping the consciousness of African American communities, providing a model for assertive empowerment while addressing immediate needs. The combination of armed self-defense, social programming, intellectual engagement, and strategic media presence allowed the party to carve a unique niche in the civil rights landscape, bridging the gap between protest and practical support, between philosophy and action. The legacy of this rapid expansion is evident in the enduring recognition of the Black Panther Party as a symbol of organized, community-focused resistance and as a blueprint for movements seeking to challenge systemic inequities while simultaneously building resilience, pride, and solidarity. The story of the BP's national growth reminds us that effective activism requires vision, strategy, and a deep understanding of both local realities and broader social dynamics, and that a movement grounded in moral clarity, disciplined organization, and community empowerment can inspire profound change. From Oakland to cities across the United States, the Black Panther Party demonstrated that when leadership is informed, principled, and courageous, the effects can ripple far beyond the initial points of action, leaving a lasting imprint on both communities and the national consciousness. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others to continue celebrating the remarkable journey and enduring influence of Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, and the Black Panther Party. As the Black Panther Party grew from a small Oakland-based organization to a nationally recognized movement, the internal dynamics that had initially fueled its rapid expansion began to reveal the complexities and vulnerabilities inherent in any revolutionary organization operating under intense scrutiny. The vision that Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale had nurtured a combination of community service, self-defense, and political advocacy was both ambitious and inherently challenging to sustain across multiple cities. Diverse memberships and varying local contexts. While the party's growth was a testament to its resonance and organizational skill, it also created tensions among members about the organization's ultimate priorities, strategies, and philosophical direction. Newton had consistently emphasized the importance of serving local African American communities, instituting survival programs that provided food, health care, and education to those most in need, believing that tangible improvements in daily life were as crucial to the liberation struggle as ideological commitment. Yet, others within the party, most notably Eldridge Cleaver, began to advocate for a broader, internationally focused revolutionary approach, drawing inspiration from anti-imperialist struggles around the world and seeking to position the Black Panther Party as part of a global movement against oppression and colonialism. This divergence in vision was not merely theoretical. It affected day-to-day decision-making. resource allocation, and the tone and content of party communications. And it sowed seeds of friction that would intensify over time. The philosophical and strategic disagreements manifested in a variety of ways, from debates over recruitment priorities to disputes over the allocation of funds between local community programs and support for international revolutionary efforts. Newton's insistence on grounding the party's actions in the concrete realities of African American urban communities sometimes clashed with Cleaver's ideological vision of a radical global solidarity, one that demanded high-profile actions, militant posturing, and alignment with anti-imperialist figures worldwide. These conflicts were complicated further by the pressures of operating under constant surveillance and interference from law enforcement agencies, particularly the Federal Bureau of Investigation, whose COINTELPRO program sought to disrupt and discredit black nationalist and radical organizations. The FBI's tactics were sophisticated and relentless, ranging from the dissemination of disinformation to infiltration by undercover agents, to fostering distrust and conflict between members. In many cases, these external pressures exacerbated existing internal tensions, transforming disagreements over strategy into personal rivalries and creating an atmosphere of suspicion that undermined organizational cohesion. As the party expanded, chapters in different cities interpreted the core principles of the organization in ways that reflected local conditions. But this decentralization, while empowering, also made uniform adherence to the party's mission more difficult. Some chapters leaned heavily into the armed self-defense aspect, engaging in confrontations with law enforcement and drawing intense public scrutiny, while others focused primarily on social programs, seeking to build schools, health clinics, and community initiatives. The tension between these approaches reflected not only differing interpretations of revolutionary priorities, but also practical concerns about sustainability and safety, especially as the FBI actively sought to create rifts and weaken the party from within. Newton, despite his charisma and visionary leadership, was forced to navigate these competing pressures while maintaining a public image that balanced militancy with social responsibility, a task made all the more difficult by the ever-present threat of legal entanglements, arrests, and targeted harassment from authorities. The internal strife reached its peak as the ideological rift between Newton and Cleaver became more pronounced, leading to factionalism within the party. Disagreements over the party's direction were no longer abstract debates. They were concrete conflicts affecting leadership roles, public messaging, and organizational strategy. Violence erupted in some chapters, tragically resulting in the deaths of several members, and the cohesion that had allowed the party to flourish began to erode. The psychological toll on Newton and other leaders was significant, as they were forced to reconcile their commitment to community empowerment with the harsh realities of operating under both internal dissent and external suppression. The very qualities that had propelled the party to national prominence, its audacity, its willingness to challenge authority, and its insistence on defending African American communities at all costs, also made it vulnerable to these pressures, revealing the delicate balance between idealism and pragmatism in any movement seeking transformative change. Despite these challenges, Newton's influence remained a stabilizing force, particularly in emphasizing the moral and ethical underpinnings of the party's mission. His belief that social programs, education, and empowerment were critical components of liberation provided a counterweight to the factionalism and militancy that threatened to fragment the organization. Nevertheless, the combination of internal ideological conflicts and the sustained, targeted efforts of the FBI to destabilize the party created an environment in which long-term organizational cohesion was increasingly difficult to maintain. Chapters faced difficulties in communication and trust, and membership morale was impacted as individuals questioned the efficacy and direction of the movement they had joined with high hopes and unwavering dedication. The decline of the party, therefore, cannot be understood solely as a result of external repression. It was also a consequence of the inherent tensions and complex human dynamics that emerge when visionary ideals confront practical realities, especially under conditions of extreme stress and surveillance. By the early 1970s, these internal and external pressures had culminated in a gradual weakening of the party's national structure. While local chapters continued to provide valuable social services and maintain a presence in their communities, the broader unity that had characterized the BP's rise was no longer sustainable. The rift between those advocating for strict adherence to local community service and those seeking broader revolutionary alliances, compounded by the FIA's disruptive activities, meant that the party could no longer function as a single, cohesive national entity. Yet even amid decline, the legacy of the Black Panther Party endured, as the programs and activism it inspired continued to influence subsequent generations of community organizers, civil rights advocates, and scholars of social justice. The story of the party's internal conflicts serves as a powerful reminder of the difficulties inherent in balancing idealism, strategy, and human imperfection, highlighting both the resilience and vulnerability of movements committed to profound social change. Through all these challenges, Huey P. Newton's vision of an empowered, self-determined African American community remained central, demonstrating that even in the face of internal divisions and external oppression, the pursuit of justice, equality, and community upliftment could leave a lasting impact. The Black Panther Party's trajectory from a small Oakland chapter to a nationally recognized movement, and eventually to its fracturing under ideological and political pressures, underscores the complexities of leadership, the challenges of sustaining radical movements, and the enduring power of purpose-driven activism. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others to keep the history and lessons of the Black Panther Party alive for future generations. Huey P. Newton's journey as a revolutionary and community leader was marked not only by his vision and activism, but also by the immense personal and legal pressures that came with challenging entrenched systems of power. Pressures that would define much of his adult life and shape both his leadership and his legacy. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, as the Black Panther Party had risen to national prominence, Newton's high profile and the party's confrontational stance toward law enforcement inevitably made him a target of intense scrutiny and legal action. The legal challenges he faced were complex and multifaceted, involving charges that ranged from assault to murder, each case intertwined with the political and social turbulence of the era. Newton's arrests and trials were widely publicized, often framed by media outlets and law enforcement in ways that painted him as a dangerous radical. Yet behind the headlines lay a man navigating a complicated and hostile system while attempting to stay true to his mission of defending African American communities. These legal battles were not merely procedural. They were deeply entangled with the broader campaign of COINTELPRO, a secret 50 program aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, and disrupting the Black Panther Party and other movements deemed subversive. The intense legal scrutiny Newton endured was therefore inseparable from the political context of his activism, with every courtroom appearance reflecting both the personal stakes of his freedom and the broader struggle of the party against systemic oppression. Newton's encounters with the criminal justice system were a continual test of his resilience and strategic acumen. The murder charge that he faced in particular became a focal point for public attention, symbolizing the precarious position of the Black Panther Party in the eyes of the law and the media. For Newton, every step of the legal process from arrest to pretrial detention to courtroom hearings was fraught with tension, uncertainty, and the need for constant vigilance. Yet even under these circumstances, he remained committed to the principles that had guided him since the founding of the party, recognizing that the outcomes of these legal challenges would resonate far beyond his personal freedom. In many, Newton's navigation of the legal system became an extension of his activism itself, demonstrating the intertwining of personal and political struggle in an era where African American leaders were often criminalized for their resistance to systemic injustice. He had to balance his public persona, his obligations to the party, and his personal survival, all while facing an often hostile judicial system that seemed predisposed to interpret his militancy and leadership as threats to the established order. Amid these pressures, Newton's personal decisions, including a period of exile in Cuba, underscored both the severity of the legal risks he faced and the lengths to which he would go to protect himself while continuing to influence the movement. Fleeing to Cuba was not merely an act of evasion. It was a strategic move that allowed him to temporarily remove himself from the immediate dangers of law enforcement while also connecting, in spirit and practice, with broader anti-imperialist struggles that had inspired him and Bobby Seale from the beginning. During this period abroad, Newton remained engaged with the ideas that had fueled the party's growth, reflecting deeply on the challenges of sustaining a revolutionary organization in the face of relentless opposition. His time in exile also highlighted the transnational dimensions of the Black Panther Party's vision, as Newton saw the struggle for African American liberation not as isolated within the borders of the United States, but as part of a global context of resistance against colonialism, oppression, and systemic inequality. The political and ideological reflections he cultivated during this period abroad would inform his leadership and public statements upon his return, reinforcing his commitment to both the survival and evolution of the party despite the legal and logistical obstacles he faced. Returning to the United States to confront the pending legal charges was itself an act of courage and commitment, reflecting Newton's understanding that leadership involved not only inspiring others, but also confronting the consequences of one's actions head-on. His trials, particularly for the murder and assault charges, were complex, often marked by high-profile courtroom drama, contentious testimony, and a media environment eager to sensationalize the proceedings. Newton's approach to these trials reflected both his strategic thinking and his understanding of symbolism. He recognized that his presence, demeanor, and public statements would be scrutinized as much as the legal arguments themselves, and he leveraged these opportunities to continue advocating for the principles of the Black Panther Party. Supporters rallied outside courtrooms, using these moments to highlight broader issues of racial injustice, systemic bias, and the criminalization of black leadership, turning Newton's legal battles into focal points for community organizing and activism. The interplay between Newton's personal legal struggles and the public messaging of the party reinforced the centrality of his leadership, while also emphasizing the high stakes inherent in challenging entrenched power structures. Throughout these trials, Newton faced the dual pressures of demonstrating resilience under legal duress while maintaining credibility and trust among party members, whose loyalty and morale were closely tied to his leadership. The legal threats, coupled with internal organizational challenges, required a delicate balance of transparency, decisiveness, and rhetorical skill. Newton had to manage the fears and expectations of a membership that was often youthful and idealistic, while also contending with the complexities of legal strategy, courtroom procedures, and the political implications of each case. His experiences in these trials, including navigating allegation, countering misrepresentations, and asserting his rights, served to strengthen his resolve and clarify the stakes of the movement he had co-founded. The combination of legal challenges and political pressure highlighted the extraordinary difficulty of sustaining both personal safety and organizational coherence in a context of systemic hostility and targeted surveillance. Ultimately, Newton's encounters with the criminal justice system, his periods of incarceration, and his temporary exile to Cuba demonstrate the profound entanglement of personal risk and political leadership that defined his life. These experiences underscore the realities faced by activists operating within highly adversarial contexts, where the pursuit of justice and empowerment intersects with formidable legal and institutional obstacles. Newton's navigation of these challenges, his strategic thinking, resilience, and unwavering commitment to community upliftment serves as a testament to both the personal cost of leadership and the enduring impact of principled activism. His story illustrates that the path of a revolutionary leader is never linear or devoid of hardship, and that courage, vision, and dedication are often tested most in the crucible of legal and political adversity. Newton's life, marked by confrontation with law enforcement, incarceration, and temporary self-imposed exile, ultimately reflects a profound commitment to the ideals he championed, leaving a legacy of resistance, empowerment, and unflinching advocacy that continues to inspire generations of activists. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others to keep the story of Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party alive and influential for years to come. As the story of Huey P. Newton draws to a close, it becomes clear that his life was a testament to the extraordinary courage and resilience required to confront a deeply entrenched system of racial injustice in America. Newton's path was never simple or safe, yet his unwavering commitment to the empowerment of African American communities defined the very essence of the Black Power movement. From the streets of Oakland to the national spotlight, Newton's vision combined an uncompromising readiness to defend his community with the creation of programs that uplifted the most vulnerable. Through initiatives like free food banks, medical clinics, educational opportunities, and support networks for families affected by incarceration, Newton demonstrated that the struggle for liberation was not only about confrontation with oppressive forces, but also about nurturing and strengthening communities from within. These survival programs were not just acts of charity. They were revolutionary tools designed to create self-reliance, solidarity, and dignity for those marginalized by systemic inequality. Newton's philosophy and methods were, at times, contentious. Critics both within and outside the African American community debated the use of armed self-defense and the confrontational tactics employed by the Black Panther Party, with some questioning whether such approaches exacerbated tensions with law enforcement. Yet it was precisely this combination of militant readiness and community-focused activism that made the movement both dynamic and impactful. Newton recognized that true liberation required both protection from immediate threats and the establishment of sustainable structures that empowered people to improve their lives. And he pursued these goals with relentless determination. His intellectual engagement with global revolutionary thought, from the existentialist insights of Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre to the strategic lessons of Mao Zedong, informed a vision that transcended local concerns, situating the struggle for Black empowerment within a broader context of international resistance to oppression and inequality. Despite facing relentless surveillance, legal battles, internal organizational conflicts, and the ever-present threat of violence, Newton remained committed to the ideals that had shaped his early activism. His life was punctuated by moments of intense personal risk and profound public scrutiny. Yet through it all, he remained a figure whose charisma, intellect, and moral courage inspired countless individuals. The Black Panther Party, under his leadership, became a symbol of both defiance and hope, proving that ordinary people could organize, resist, and implement meaningful social change in the face of systemic barriers. Newton's ability to blend strategic vision with practical action made him an enduring figure in American history, one whose influence extended far beyond his immediate community and time. Tragically, Newton's life was cut short in 1989, a loss felt deeply by the communities he had served and the movement he had helped define. His death did not erase his contributions or the lessons of his leadership. Rather, It cemented his legacy as a figure who dared to challenge injustice in every form, and whose life embodied the complexities, sacrifices, and triumphs of revolutionary activism. Today, his story serves as a powerful reminder that meaningful change often comes at great personal cost, and that courage, vision, and determination are indispensable qualities for anyone seeking to confront systemic inequities and uplift marginalized communities. Newton's legacy is not merely historical. It continues to resonate in contemporary movements advocating for racial justice, equity, and community empowerment. Modern activists draw inspiration from his ability to combine principled militancy with tangible community programs, recognizing that systemic change requires both bold resistance and proactive social support. The lessons of his life encourage reflection on the nature of leadership, the challenges of sustaining revolutionary movements, and the enduring need for courage in the pursuit of justice. By studying Newton's achievements and struggles, current and future generations gain insights into the strategies, risks, and rewards inherent in advocating for transformative social change. His story is a testament to the enduring power of resilience, vision, and community-oriented activism, reminding us all that the fight for justice is both a moral and practical endeavor, requiring steadfast commitment and unyielding hope. As we reflect on the extraordinary journey of Huey P. Newton, it is important to honor not only his achievements, but also the lessons his life imparts. The necessity of courage in confronting oppression, the importance of serving and uplifting one's community, and the enduring impact that committed leadership can have on society. Newton's life challenges us to consider our own roles in promoting justice, equality, and empowerment, encouraging each of us to find ways to contribute meaningfully to the ongoing struggle against systemic inequities. His story, though marked by controversy and difficulty, ultimately shines as a beacon of inspiration, reminding us that profound change often begins with those willing to confront challenges head-on, blend vision with action, and remain dedicated to the betterment of others even in the face of adversity. Thank you so much for watching and taking the time to learn about the remarkable life of Huey P. Newton. If you found this video insightful, inspiring, or thought-provoking, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to support our work and help keep these important stories alive. Your engagement allows us to continue bringing history to life in ways that honor the struggles and achievements of those who fought for justice. From all of us here, good night, and may you rest well knowing that the courage, determination, and spirit of leaders like Huey P. Newton continue to inspire change and hope in our world.